In today's lesson, I'm going to show you how you can take some ordinary leaves that you can find in your backyard and turn them into a really beautiful printmaking project. So I get a lot of ferns in my backyard in summertime, and I get these nice ferns with these little delicate leaves on them, and then I get ferns that have these nice thick fat leaves. And so I'm going to use both kinds of ferns to make my print because they make a really interesting print when they've been inked. Now, the ink that I use is called block printing ink, but I think you could also try this with paint if you painted the paint onto the fern with a brush and pressed it down onto your paper. But I'm going to use block printing ink and a roller. Now this roller is made especially for printmaking, and you can get it at any art supply store. But you could also use a roller from a hardware store, either a foam roller or one of those rollers that are small that you can paint trim with. So any kind of roller or even a paintbrush would work for this printing project. So what I do is I put my ink on my inking tray. Now this is an inking tray for printmaking, but you could use a plate or a piece of foam that you get at the grocery store, you know, that they pack vegetables on, or anything that's just really nice and flat that can hold something wet. And you get your ink on your roller, and you don't want a ton of ink, you want just enough to coat the fern. So I like to kind of make a nice flat spot out of my glob of ink on my inking tray. And then instead of using the whole fern, what I'm going to do is just break off one of these nice delicate leaves. It makes it a little bit flatter and a little bit easier to print. So I will ink up my fern here on one piece of paper, nice and gently. And as you can see, it's kind of sticking to my roller, but I don't mind that. And then I'm going to take a roller that doesn't have ink on it, and I'm going to lay my fern ink side down on another piece of paper and use the dry roller to flatten the leaf onto the paper, and then gently pick it up. And you get this really, really beautiful fern print. Now let's try the other one. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to break off one of the fern leaves. And ink it. And what's cool about doing this, inking it on a separate piece of paper, is that sometimes you get kind of interesting shape on your other paper as well. And I think that could be a nice piece of art as well. I'm going to, again, press my leaf down with another dry roller. Now, if you have to do this with a paintbrush, it's kind of the same process. You take a dry brush and smush it down gently and try not to move it too much. But it works really nicely with a roller. And then pull it up, and you get another beautiful fern. So I'm going to go ahead and make a few fern prints to make an entire picture of my ferns. So as you can see, I've added a bunch more prints, kind of alternating from the different kinds of ferns. And what's happening as I'm doing this is the dry roller that I was using to smooth out the inked fern is getting ink on it too. So it's kind of creating this really nice texture. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that actually adds interest to your artwork and kind of gives it a shadowy, sort of foresty feeling. So right now I've mostly done just prints with one of the fern leaves that I picked off. If you want to try to do multiple leaves, you can. What I would recommend if you want to try to do what's more like a whole fern is break off the bottom part of the fern. So you just get the top, and then if you want to kind of give it a little stem, you can break off some of these bottom leaves. And you can leave it together like this and lay it on your paper that you're using as scrap for the inking. And just gently add your ink to the fern by only inking the leaves on one side of the stem and then the other. Because if you try to do the whole thing at once, it's going to stick to your roller and it's going to smush up your fern and you're not going to get that nice print. So you want to just gently go on one side, then the other to ink up your larger fern. Now I'll pick this up and maybe I'll add it up here. And again, when you're inking it onto your paper, just gently kind of push outwards from the stem as best you can and pull it up. And you get this nice print, almost looks like a fossil. It's just beautiful. I really like this project a lot because it's really simple. And I've done this with aspen leaves, with maple leaves. So it doesn't have to be a fern. It can be any interesting leaf that you find in your yard. I think a knotweed leaf would be great because it's a nice big leaf, an oak leaf. And I think as you keep adding them, you want to leave space. So you want to leave what's called negative space, the white part of the paper, and make the positive space with the leaf so that you have a nice balance of leaves versus negative space so that you get a really nice design. And I think you should try this at home with all different kinds of leaves. And if you want to try this project and you want to share it with us, please send photos to info@catskillartsociety.org, and we'd love to see what you've been up to. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.